Where are we going next? Beirut, and an update on Beirut. And while some people scream, "Show me the money," and wail at the trustee, others are asking, where are our people and where is our city? Like Beirut. And new drone footage captured by RT's video agency abruptly reveals the devastation at Ground Zero in Beirut's port in detail, 1 month after the massive explosion which shook the Lebanese capital, which has been surprisingly kept out of the mainstream media news. I wonder why. Now, which group of people own the media? And the video shows the port where the now infamous warehouse full of improperly stored explosives used to sit. Yeah, right. And the whole area was essentially flattened by the blast. No building was left standing. As far as 10 kilometres out, the damage went. Apart from the massive grain silos that managed to withstand the explosion and even shielded part of the city. And the report says Ground Zero looks like a barren wasteland marked with shells of buildings buried under fragments of former walls and roofs. Further away, the half-destroyed surrounding landscape of a windowless city buildings can be seen. Meanwhile, the roads between the ruins are full of moving cars, creating some surreal imagery. Now, the huge explosion on August the 4th in the report states that 190 people were killed, injuring more than 6,000 and left around 300,000 homeless. And it was said that it was down to 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate is believed to have fueled the explosions, having been unsafely stored in the portside warehouse since 2014. And as we know, that's a lot different. And the real report states that there are over 1,000 who are dead in Beirut. Next, we're going to Melbourne and Australia, down under. And this is a report from one of our members on the ground over there. And so we get some more real reporting on what is really going on and not the bullshit we have to tolerate from certain portions of alt media and the whole of mainstream media. And it says, as many have mentioned to me, the protest was called off in Melbourne for Saturday, September the 5th. And he said, thank you for the alerts that the protest was called off. And it is true, it was, and as such was a decoy event for the following reasons. To understand what interstate and international support there was for us, to know what kind of response the Victoria Police would offer, and so what happened at the protest location for the so-called protest that ended up being called off. Well, first, the Victoria Police were out in force to ensure people remained in their suburbs on weekends. ID checks and 20 questions in many locations, and included community bike trails, for example, and that continued, although there was a reduced police presence in the suburbs. What happened instead of a protest was many people who lived in the area chose to go for their daily hour of exercise, which has been ordained as a rule now, between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. nearby the named location, the War Memorial and Shrine of Remembrance. And what we learned during that hour of exercise / protest is that there are two Victoria Police forces, one in the normal gear and police cars, normal over angry police we have sadly grown used to, terrorising old and young alike. and another in Darth Vader-looking riot gear, who travelled in black unmarked vans, and when their arms moved one could observe a UN Victoria police badge. A UN Victoria police badge. And the police will arrest journalists and harass them after dark at their house at 10:30 p.m. at night, and the footage went viral. And the reporter says, yes, let that sink in for all you folks. We had the UN peacekeepers on our shore yesterday. They were easily startled like a horse, and sadly they travelled in packs of 60 plus and ran at groups of exercisers and surrounded them all until they went home. I guess social distancing doesn't apply for them either. And the international and interstate response, I have to admit, was a shock for all the right reasons. I saw many photos on Twitter with the red version of the Australian flag out flying or being held up across America, Canada, Europe, UK, New Zealand, and hundreds of other country, towns and cities across Australia. Now, based on chatter locally, this helped a lot of locals move from or aware of a problem to realising there is no Messiah coming to save us. And a lot of expats are calling home. And today the Premier launched a further extension by 14 days, or the classic Langley programme, 2 weeks. Yes, Drakey Cakes, 2 weeks. Well... and also launched a series of measures that are unworkable and immeasurable, and many are awakening to the sham that our Premier is working under. Now, some of the documents leaked on Twitter tonight, and a document signed by the following on the 23rd of October 2019 in Beijing. The Premier, the State Government of Victoria, the Commonwealth of Australia, and Vice Chairman, the National Development and the Reform Commission of the People's Republic of China. 23rd of October 2019. And it said this is what was taking place. Now, this is my input. To the Australian people, I will link you all back to an event that was covered in our show in Australia last June that got some publicity but largely uncovered nothing. That event now appears to be the start of the planning against your people and the country. So what was that event? Remember the 3 unannounced Chinese warships. And connect the dots. Now, during that meeting in Beijing, a reference was made to a roadmap being developed between both parties on March 2020, which was launched today. And this is understood to be the Belt and Road infrastructure work, all predating the pandemic. Test kits. Evidence that the test kits were swapped from locally developed coronavirus test kits in May, and the swabs samples taken are being processed in China and going into a genome database for bioweapon design. And reference was also made to purchase of COVID test kits in 2018. And the evidence, the death toll from coronavirus is inflated. Many people have come forward to claim they rejected the 10,000 Australian dollars payment to have their parents' death counted as a COVID death. Who's giving the hospital these money? this money. The state chief health officer met with an arranged group of specialists from across Australia last Wednesday, and details are starting to come out from the Zoom call, and it's fair to say the CHO didn't fare well with his colleagues, and it looks like the game is up. The medical profession has launched a website to advise people called the COVIDDoctorsNetwork.com to channel their public voice, and 500 plus medical professionals are contributing to the effort so far. Now, it might not be immediately apparent from a first read of the summary of information shared online tonight, and I will add that the details shared was leaked from the inner circle of the Premier's trusted team. Documents showed his signature and that of others, and on official paper, for example. The cracks are beginning to show big time. And what is pleasing to note is, again, under tremendous pressure, the people of Melbourne have not buckled to return violence with violence, and that much is at stake. Rather, the approach has been to problem solve and do what one can do, and the phrase many hands makes light work. But there you have it. So thanks for that report. I can't always put them in every week, but every now and again I can drop one in. So, as in many other countries now, the people and some authorities, particularly in the medical field, are starting to work shit out and coming together, and that's fantastic to see. Even Trump tweeted this week, the pandemic is a hoax. But the questions that remain is, A, what are you going to do about it? B, do you have any power to change it? And C, why after 4 years do you not have an enforcement team? Next to President Trump again. On Monday, he accused the United States military leadership of being beholden to arms manufacturers in an attack on his own administration only days after reports that allegedly he had mocked fallen soldiers, according to the media report. But A, to answer back to that, it's not his own administration. And B, that alleged mocking has no solid proof. Now, the report went on, speaking at a combative White House news conference, Trump said leaders at the Pentagon were probably not in love with him because, quote, they want to do nothing but fight wars so that all of those wonderful companies that make the bombs and make the planes and make everything else stay happy, unquote. In a further quote, he said, some people don't like to come home. Some people like to continue to spend money, Trump said. And the report then went on to accuse Trump of being one cold-hearted globalist betrayal after another. That's what it was, it said. Now, he also asserted that while US troops largely support him, he does not receive the same affinity from the top, and he made the comment as he advocated for the removal of American troops from endless wars and lambasted NATO allies who rip us off. Oops. You know, I've criticised Trump in this show, but to me, that is a massive round of applause for Mr. Trump for saying publicly what this show and others have been stating for a long time. And this was a groundbreaking announcement in many ways. We need many more like this needs to follow up. Message to all, you know who you are. Following orders from the so-called hierarchy is a recipe for disaster in these times. Just saying. Next, we go from the land of confusion to the land of illusion, Israel. And Kosovo will establish diplomatic relations with each other, according to reports this week, while Serbia will move its embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. And both moves came during a US-backed talks in Washington this week. Now, Prime Minister or Crime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's press office announced his country's recognition of Kosovo on Friday, making Israel the 98th UN member state to recognise the former Serbian province. Now, Kosovo in turn will recognise Israel. Glad you can, but I can't. Becoming one of only a handful of Muslim-majority countries to do so. And the move was announced as Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and Kosovo's Prime Minister Abdullah Hoti met with US President Donald Trump at the White House with the wax dummy standing behind him to discuss normalising their economic relations. And this comes 2 decades after a devastating conflict between them ended with a NATO bombing campaign against Serbia. Now, it was said, another great day for peace with Middle East Muslim-majority Kosovo and Israel have agreed to normalise ties and establish diplomatic relations. Well done, it said. This was according to Kushner, more Islamic and Arab nations will follow soon. My opinion on that? The silent coups continue in the former Rus and Aryan nations to become subservient puppets to the Hebrew Anunnaki anti-human usurpers. Unquote. Now, here is part of an article written by someone else with my input added to it, and this will give some background to that previous story. What unfolded was that Israel sold massive amounts of weapons to Serbia during the horrific war in Serbia during the Milosevic period. And generally, people are just not aware of the relationship that exists between Serbia and Israel. There is a lot that takes place in the Balkans, Bulgaria, Kosovo, Montenegro, Albania, and so much goes on in the Balkans. And it's said that Israel wants its footprint there. And now that the US moved its embassy to Jerusalem, Serbia is following. So for my input, why do they want the footprint there? For war against the Rus and the Aryans again is why. And it is the hidden war that has played out for the past 100 years or so, and way further back, and all done by these same peoples under the banner of Bolshevism, Nazism, Wahhabism, Sufism, and a number of other terrorist-based groups, all bought and paid for by clowns. The forefront of it is NATO, which is Aton, and Egypt's off-world god worship again these people operate under, whilst hiding behind the term Jewish, which is not a race or a colour, and it is an anti-human law-based religion of control. Period. The report went on and said when you think of Israel, think of it as an extension of the United States. Israel is a sister state of the United States. Remember, the United States is not America. The US is even using Israeli computer software on many of the government systems, and Rudy Giuliani has brokered many deals reaping millions of dollars. And the report says, who do I think is the number one most dangerous person in the White House? No surprise, Jared Kushner. The second most dangerous is also not a surprise, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of the Deep State. So just think of Israel as the satellite country and sister country of the United States. And the reporter says, am I happy about this? No, it burns me. It burns me. And he said that Israel has been gathering information on Americans much longer than anyone realizes. And he said, like myself, I have nothing against ordinary Jewish people at all. But there is a political echelon in Israel that I find quite disturbing and a threat to every American citizen. I agree with that 100%. And unless Americans and 207 other countries, people and governments recognise this as a fact and act, these psychopaths will annihilate us all. And the irony is the world is focusing on identities, be it black, gay, transgender or otherwise, and yet fail to see your identity as a human is under serious threat by these psychopaths.